Hello, everyone, and happy Earth Day. We're happy to see you and wish we could all be together. Unfortunately, we're not quite there yet, though I think we're getting closer. So hopefully Earth Day 2022, we will all be outside on a beautiful day like this talking about sustainability at Carolina. So I just wanted to provide a little context for Earth Day of 2021. I hope that you all have seen the announcements of the past week. Released a new climate action plan, which was very exciting. It builds on the accomplishments of the 2009 climate action plan and expands and specifies more direct routes to getting to carbon neutrality and doing so 10 years faster than we had planned to. So we're really excited to have that occur just a few weeks or a couple weeks after Chapel Hill came forward with their plan and an action plan to do great things. And we're glad to be part of a community that is actively engaged in trying to do the right thing around all of these pressing issues. We also had an exciting announcement today that we have a new piece of sustainability at Carolina, the Champion Sustainability Fund. And so through a generous corporate gift of $1 million, we have this new fund that will fuel our sustainability activities, hopefully for a long time to come. It's going to be set up as a green revolving fund, which means at its core, its interest will be in looking for efficiencies that can be invested in on campus. And then as those efficiencies return savings, those savings go back into the fund. And that's the revolving part. And so hopefully it'll be as effective as some of our colleagues. University of Vermont is a great example. Harvard is a great example. University of Arizona, Boston University, where people get to tens of millions of dollars. So we're really grateful to Champion and to Haynes Brands for their faith in us and for the partnership that we're going to have with them going forward. So that was a really exciting thing just today. But if you look back over the last year, this is the 1-year anniversary of the Chancellor establishing the Carolina Sustainability Council. And in that year, we've done a lot of things, which is exciting. I think we all said at our first meeting that we wanted to get some traction and get some great accomplishments. And my personal goal was to have a meeting like this 1 year later and be able to make substantive announcements about progress around sustainability at Carolina. And I think we really have reached that. So I'm excited to have a great panel with us tonight, and I'm looking forward to interacting with them and talking about some of the specifics of the things that I've outlined a little bit. But for now, I'd like to introduce you to two members of our Carolina Sustainability Council, Nathaniel and Mary Catherine, MC, and Nate, and John Richardson from Chapel Hill, who is the Community Resilience Officer in Chapel Hill and has been a great partner for me as I begin in this job that is not something that I have a ton of experience in this realm. So we're really excited to continue our great connection with Chapel Hill and build a really positive relationship around this critical facet of our university's function, of the town's function, and just the really high quality of life for all the people who live here. So we have a series of questions that we're going to address. And as we go, if you would please put any questions you have into the Q&A. You can go ahead and put them in anytime you want. Our intention is probably to work through this front part that's informational and talking about some issues some things that have gone on in the past year and some details about experiences we've had and plans we might have. So our plan will be to wrap that up and then go to the Q&A and answer questions that you have. And a handful of our questions we've already thought about that we're going to flip around and we're going to ask you out in the audience, what do you think? What are your ideas around these issues? So we're excited to be here, and thank you all again. And we'll start out with, we've got this new climate action plan, and it is a draft by design. Because of the pandemic, we couldn't have the stakeholder engagement process we hoped for. So instead, we have a system set up for anyone who wants to, all the public, students, faculty, staff, people in Chapel Hill, people anywhere can read the plan and provide feedback. So Nate, can you tell me about how people can do that?
Yeah, so the most important way that we can do this is utilizing the feedback form. So if you go onto the Sustainable Carolina website, there is a link to a form that you can fill out to just submit your feedback. That's going to be open until mid-June, I believe, at which point we will go through that feedback and sort of rework the action plan based on that feedback. So it is really important that people are looking at it and doing it. That's going to be the biggest way we get information from you guys. And I will put the link to that form in the Zoom chat, so you can kind of get to it quickly. I believe I can send stuff to attendees. Okay, great. And then the other thing I just want to say is just generally talking about it and reading it and looking at it and getting conversations going is super important. Generally, the biggest thing we want is people pushing and people talking about it. Even if you don't fill out the feedback form, although you should, if you're talking to somebody else about it, they might be inspired to. So just keeping those conversations going and brainstorming and coming up with your own ideas. You might not feel like you have feedback, but the more you talk about it, the more you might be like, hey, what about this? Hey, what about that? So having those conversations and utilizing that form.
I think that's a great point. And it's never going to be a perfect substitute for all of us gathering together on campus and talking about it. But I think you're right that feedback is great, but conversations are another. I've had a handful of conversations already that have led to questions about, so what specifically does this mean? And it is a really ambitious plan. It moves up our target by 10 years for carbon neutrality, as I mentioned, and has a lot of specific approaches. So we are welcoming people's perspectives and ideas, and you can see clearly where we started, where we are, and where we hope to go. So hopefully that'll be a great platform for people to interact with the plan. So in the past year, we have transitioned from the previous organizational framework and strategic framework for sustainability on campus, which was 3 zeros, to something that we call Sustainable Carolina. And so that's had a couple of foundational pieces, kind of reorganization of the professional group, and it's retained 3 zeros as our aspirational goals. But MC, can you tell me, just based on what you've seen in your interactions with the council and your work, as both of you two, I've failed to mention, are elected officials and are the co-chairs of the, is it SEAC? I always forget. It's the, yeah, is that right? No?
EAC,
Yeah.
Environmental Affairs Committee.
Gotcha. I always had an S. So in your role as elected officials who have a role around environment and sustainability, can you tell me your perspectives on how you see Sustainable Carolina as something different than new?
Yes, of course. So to me, at least, it's kind of starting fresh in a sense. So we're redefining what our goals are, and we're outlining them. So we're not just stating what they are, we're stating how we're going to solve these problems, what we're going to do. We're also going to be the ones tracking this progress. Like Mike has mentioned, this is a draft. So we're going to be continuously improving it, updating it. Another important thing that was mentioned in the climate action plan is that we're not going to be updating it every 5 to 10 years. So we're going to be the ones monitoring it, and we want other people to hold us accountable as well. Transparency is huge when it comes to students, faculty, and staff, and we want this to all be around sustainable activity at Carolina. So we're not going to be just focusing on the 3 zeros anymore. We're encompassing everything, and we've actually been able to move up some goals that is now going to be 2040 instead of 2050. So we're really looking forward and just striving to do all we can within the time that we have.
I think it's a great answer. And I think all of the, the key points around, we're going to be authentic and say this worked, this didn't, and here's why. Because we are setting really bold goals, and we hopefully will succeed at everything, but seldom, if you are as bold as we've been, does everything go exactly as you hoped. And hopefully in that interim of 30 years, that things, the 20 years that we're trying to get to carbon neutrality, more things will happen on the positive side as well. And I think your point about not updating every 5 or 10 years is a great one. This is an evergreen document that will be on the web, that as technology changes, as successes or failures happen, the changes can be made to hopefully accelerate all our progress, but at least if there are problems, clearly articulate them. So thank you. I think that's great. So the next thing we're going to talk about is where people can get the latest updates and sustainability news. And I'll take this one. Nate alluded to sustainable.unc.edu and dropped the link to the What Can I Do section. That is our reworked and rebranded website that has some very familiar looking pieces and is a work in progress. It's going to have additional resources very soon. All of our social media is rebranded. So if people aren't involved with our Twitter and our Facebook and our Instagram, please engage. And if you are involved and haven't been paying attention, please do. I think we have some really neat stuff up there. We're going to have once we get into, once we get through our next meeting of the Sustainability Council, we're going to have a routine set of engagements like this, sort of town hall meetings. And we also hopefully will get back to the point where we can have fun events on important days like Earth Day. So I think that that's a great thing to talk about and to update people on. I know that everyone wants to know what's going on, and I think we have some really clear pathways now. So our next question is one thinking about partnership and collaboration, and that takes on a lot of different possible manifestations. But John, I'll ask you about that. Maybe how you've partnered and collaborated with from Chapel Hill with the university in the past, and perhaps some things that you see as new opportunities as we move forward.
Yeah, sure. So, some folks may not know, but our program actually started as a collaboration with the university. 13 years ago when I started here, that was about the time that a professor from the Institute for the Environment, it wasn't called that at the time, but that's what it is, of course, now, had done some research and some work in the UK where they were really out in front on greenhouse gas emissions reduction. And they brought that idea back to Chapel Hill and approached the town council and said, might this be something we want to do here and set some targets of our own? So that, that was a really nice starting point. And I think it's really grown from there. We've, of course, benefited greatly from working with students and faculty on capstone projects and internships. In fact, we've had two really successful back-to-back internship experiences with the Apples program at UNC over the last 2 years. And so that's kind of our history, is working together and focusing on greenhouse gas emissions, at least as a unifying start. What I would also say is, looking forward, we have these two plans now, and I think there's a lot of overlap in those plans, specifically around our common interests for not only saving energy and reducing emissions, which of course naturally lends itself to our buildings and the kinds of energy we use, but also around what we do with our water and our natural resources. I think about waste being another great example of a possible area for partnership. We've got a commitment to, in our new plan, to reaching zero waste by 2045. Waste is obviously a county-wide topic and something I think we can all partner on. So resiliency is maybe another example. This is not something we were dealing with as much when I first got to Chapel Hill, but it's certainly something we're seeing the need for more and more every day. So to me, when you talk about research or other opportunities for collaboration, resiliency seems to stand out too.
No, I think that's a great point. And I think it's something that we're excited about with a broader framework, is considering not only a broader range of specific topics, but whole perspectives. And resilience is so much a complementary thing to sustainability, but really in some ways discrete in the ways that you think about things. So thank you, John, that's great. So one of our things we were going to talk about are the first big steps for Sustainable Carolina, as we've kind of outlined maybe what makes it distinctive. And this will be a little bit redundant because it'll go back through some of the highlights that I presented when we very first started. But the first steps really for Sustainable Carolina were to get this group together, the Sustainability Council, that includes graduate students, undergraduates, faculty and staff from throughout the university who are committed to sustainability and sustainability related issues, and get it to be a functional group that is generating exciting ideas and considering challenges that we're facing, and really a productive and positive force. And that has happened so fast. It is amazing. I'm grateful for everyone who gives of their time to that council. And that was the first step. So we got that up and going. We had our third meeting this semester. We'll have a fourth meeting probably sometime in May, depending on how things go with the schedules. And that group has already become a really vital source of new information and a vital resource for things like the Climate Action Plan, which was really our big first goal. And John alluded to waste and water. So our first effort is obviously focused more on greenhouse gases and energy efficiency and all the things around trying to become carbon neutral. Pretty close following that, very quickly, we're going to be more explicit about our goals around water and our goals around waste. So those, I think, will define our beginning actions. Is be really clear. As MC indicated, we don't want to just have a big, broad, great sounding framework. We want to have explicit goals in the short term and the near term and metrics to assess how well we are reaching those goals. So I think that's the big thing. We could not have foreseen the Champion Sustainability Fund, which is awesome and is just a great thing because it's going to be resources we weren't counting on. So a lot of things that everything seems to cost money and resources are limited. And so the more that we can generate resources to do the things we want to do, the better off we're going to be. It certainly will free us up. And also the Green Revolving Fund in and of itself is just a great idea. It's a neat thing to have going on at the university. So those have been our first actions. We've got ourselves reorganized with professional staff all together. And I think we are set now in the first year to really move forward in a big way, having clocked a bunch of important accomplishments in the last week or so. It's exciting to think about those being the first steps and how well primed we are to move forward from here. So from there, we wanted to talk about a group that Venela before with Nate formed, and since MC has participated in, which is an environmental coalition. So the idea when Nate and Venela and I were meeting last summer, the idea was to form a group that was the leaders of the environmental and sustainability organizations on campus. And the motivation was a town hall that was held, I don't know, maybe more than 2 years ago or 2 years ago approximately, where all of the leaders of all of the said organizations got together. And the consensus really was that there wasn't great information about who was doing what, that there wasn't great coordination from all those great organizations with great ideas up into the administration. And so our idea to try and solve that problem, if we could, was to form this group, which was the leaders of all the organizations, and have them interact at some frequency. I think monthly was the original idea, and then have lots of ways to communicate technologically, more advanced ways. Well, not technologically advanced, but like Slack and things like that, that will allow these groups to be better integrated. And early on, there were a series of presentations, and I think that some of it has been really effective, but I think that like so many things that we're going to try, we're going to learn as we go, and we're going to be adaptively managing. So maybe Nate and MC, could you talk about your perspective on successes and not as successful, and perhaps new directions and perspectives as we look forward to the really important topic of making sure, number one, that great student ideas have a way to communicate up, and also that there is shared information between the people who are, the administrative kind of level and the students, and then among the students as well.
Yeah, I guess I'll start with successes. I think you alluded to the series of presentations last fall. I think that was really effective and a really good example of moments where everybody was getting the same information from the same source. So nothing was lost in translation, nothing got re-communicated in a slightly altered way. And after 5 times of that happening, somebody had a completely different idea of what was going on. I also just think generally a lot of people were excited to be in that space and to be finding out about this stuff. I think something that we've run into in the past is that the people who are in the co-chair position in student government, so currently MC and myself, are the ones meeting most frequently with the folks over at Energy Services, with you, Mike, whereas other student orgs are meeting and leading groups of people with more niche interests in sustainable activities on campus. And so to get everybody in the room to get on the same page, I think was awesome. And I think it worked really well. I think a lot of people found out a lot of stuff out about the coal plant that they didn't entirely know. I think a lot of people found a lot of stuff out about what happened with 3 zeros and where we were going that they would not have otherwise known. And then it was also a super great way for all of the different leaders to tell each other what was going on. And there were moments where somebody would be like, hey, we're working on something similar, let's partner. Hey, we've actually kind of done something similar. You can build off of this. This is the person to meet with. And just having a space to network was really, really effective. The enthusiasm and the interest and the energy behind it sort of petered off in the second semester this year, if we're being completely honest. There was a lot less unification. We attempted to get people together before Earth Day to kind of organize and get a sense of what was everybody doing and what were everybody's events, and can we like make a mass schedule of everything going on. And it kind of never came to fruition between lack of engagement and miscommunication and delayed communication. And so I think something we want to work on next year as we move forward is continuing to push and not letting a little bit of a lag or a little bit of a hiccup prevent this from being something that works long-term, because we've seen it work. And then I just want to say it kind of at large before I hand it over to MC to add anything else to this, that on the idea of partnership that we were just talking about, I think that the coalition is a great example of a way that we can talk about all of our own like sustainable stories and the different things that are going on. And I think the biggest thing as both students as well as faculty and staff kind of look forward into the future is thinking about like what ideas do they have and what can they bring to the table. I think often people are like, oh, it'd be so great if we had this thing that is related to sustainability, but they never like feel like they have the agency to do it. And I think something like the coalition that I hope continues to grow and grow and grow and bring more people into the fold will inspire more and more people to partner with different orgs or with just different groups of people to work on a project that they're interested in. There is never harm in emailing somebody. There's never harm in emailing myself or MC or Mike or whoever it may be that might be able to help you with an idea or a project you have, or would at least be able to lead you in the right direction. And I want the coalition to serve as a home for individuals who are not necessarily tied to an org to be able to do that as well. So that's kind of my success, failure, what am I looking for as we move forward. MC, I don't know if there's anything you want to add, but I'll hand it over to you.
Add something. Yeah, so coalition and idea, amazing. Before I was one of the co-chairs, it went very successfully. And then I kind of hopped on right when it was starting to fade. People were losing interest. And a lot of that does have to do with COVID. You know, everyone's been staring at a screen all day. It's hard to stay engaged. That's just the fact of it. So hopefully when everyone is getting vaccinated, we're starting to go ahead and do that. We'll be able to have these in-person meetings where that collaboration will grow, where that interest will heighten. People will want to show up, and maybe we can even come up with like a joint project of sorts. But really, we all need to realize like why we're here, what we're coming together for, and hopefully we'll spark that back up next year.
No, I think those are all great points. Thank you, guys. And I think there's that core theme with organizations is that there's the euphoria in the beginning when everyone wants to be there, and then to get over that hump and through the valley of just getting in a groove is a hard thing, and figuring out what's going to motivate everyone to be there. I think what you said just recently, MC, was interesting, thinking about a joint project. So considering the coalition an important assimilator, but also considering it as something that would develop an altogether separate effort that everyone would be engaged in. And I know that there are some efforts like that in the past that have worked well, but I think that's a great lesson for us to look from sort of the Sustainable Carolina level and say, okay, how can we make this have more energy and be something that people want to participate in over the long run? But importantly for me, without making it something about us, because the beautiful thing of it is all of those disparate organizations and all of those student ideas and opinions. And Nate, I think your point about not having people who aren't necessarily affiliated with a specific organization is really critical too. So it is an ongoing challenge, I think, to have organizations like that sustain momentum. But thank you guys for all you've done. And I think that the point about COVID is just a good one. Everybody has hit the wall. So fingers crossed that next one of these we can at least be distributed about outside somewhere. But that's great. Thank you, guys. And I think that's something we've talked about and we'll certainly talk about at the next council meeting, getting ideas from all those folks about things they know that have worked and ideas that they've had from the past, or just things that we were hopeful about for the future. That's great. So one of the things we wanted to talk about was campus and sort of town gown, campus working with Chapel Hill, with Carborough, what kind of opportunities there are around sustainability and climate action. We've talked some about this, John, but are there other things that come to mind? Are there, whether general ideas or specific ideas? I love thinking about that, really, that this began as a partnership and all we're doing is getting back to where we were before.
Yeah, so, maybe some other obvious examples, but places where I think we can continue to grow. One would be our transit partnership. That's been around for a while. As you said, it's a good example, I think, of a partnership, not only between the town of Chapel Hill and UNC, but of course the town of Carrboro as well. And I think what's exciting there is that, as some of you may know, we've got 3 electric buses coming online this spring. We're hoping to bring up to 7 more online in the next 2.5 years to add to the fleet. And then, we've also got plans in the works for a north-south bus rapid transit corridor, even exploring an east-west BRT. So I think, that this is where we start to get into the transportation and land use connections between the university and the town, and how that town-gown interface really can work well together. We also have a mobility plan the council adopted a few years ago. The goal there is to create a town-wide network for walking and biking. It seems to me that's a place where we obviously want to grow that network, and we want that network to connect well to campus. So I think there's some shared goals and alignment there. And those two things, of course, relate to something I know you all work a lot on, which is your alternative commuting program. So, I think this is another example of where we have shared goals that are aligned, and that really all sort of point the arrows in the same direction in many cases. Building out an EV charging network is something we are trying to do townwide. I think that would also support some of your greenhouse gas emissions goals. I know you'll have similar goals for folks who are driving, and for also, I'm sure, the fleet vehicles too at campus. So those are, I guess, some other examples. But to me, it's not just about it's not just, again, about energy and greenhouse gas emissions reduction. Some of the things you all have done related to stormwater on campus, I think, are great. There's the stormwater device that's near the intersection of Country Club and I think it's Raleigh Street. That's a great example to me of where you're doing things on campus to retain stormwater, slow it down, treat it. And of course, that has a community benefit because, campus is pretty much at the top of the hill, right? And so water flows downhill. And so the more that we can partner on things like that at the top of the hill, so to speak, the more benefits there are community-wide. So I just think there's probably a lot more to say here, but maybe some other examples of where I see us already doing work together in places I think we can grow as well.
That's great, thank you. And you and I have talked about as sort of the downtown area is reconsidered, and the partnership between the university and Chapel Hill is strengthened, that there are so many opportunities for sustainability kind of activities, but also just sustainability as an economic engine. There's so much work around, whether it be things directly related to greenhouse gases or other clean tech kind of programs. It would be wonderful to have that be a big part of what Chapel Hill transitions into. Great, thank you. No, that is excellent, and I'm happy to say that John and I talk all the time, and we have big ideas. So now we just we're through the first phase. Now we got to start digging in on some of these second order things. So I think we have worked through all of our questions that we wanted to as a group. And so we were going to see if there were any questions from people watching on the webinar. Do you have anything, Emily?
Not yet.
Hey, Mike, while folks may be thinking about questions, I just wanted to add a little bit to what you were saying a second ago about the economic side of things. I think if we have shared goals about being a sustainable community, of course. and the creation of a green economy is definitely part of that, I think, for both of us. So what you said in terms of, retaining talent and ideas, and of course, there was the announcement earlier this spring around the Carolina Economic Development Strategy. I think that's another good example of where, these are all things that are sort of coming together at a really good time, and they're all interconnected. So I just wanted to, I guess, underscore your point. I think it's nice to see the stars aligning in many ways. It's exciting.
No, I totally agree. I totally agree. So if anyone who is watching has ideas around things like the environmental coalition or smart ways to better engage and inform all of our stakeholders, whether they be student, faculty, or staff, we'd love your suggestions. And if they're not at this time, that's perfectly fine. We're not going anywhere. So we have a question now about divestment. So yes, that is a topic that the council has talked about, and we actually are planning to revisit that topic at the next meeting. There are a bunch of people. I've had a great meeting with the Impact Investing Club of a really interesting approach in mind. And I've had conversations with lots of different people who have pieces of their investment portfolio that they want to have in a specific type of investments. And so how best to make that happen. So the answer is yes, we absolutely have had that conversation, and there are coordinating conversations to go on throughout the university, but that is certainly a big part of something we think about. All right, well, we don't want to keep everybody on a beautiful Earth night, but we're excited to have talked to those of you who are here, and please tell all of your friends and neighbors, and please have them reach out. I think Nate's message of send an email is a great one. We're all happy to engage, and we're looking forward to really accomplishing even more as we. Okay, good question. So here's one that came up. The council thinking about environmental justice in the climate action plan. So not specifically yet, but that's a really important point, because we are not looking to solve these problems in ways that would pass on injustice. So that certainly will be a component. I think that's a great point. We've already had feedback on the plan about it and how to be really specific in indicating that our solutions will consider whether they're, well, our assessment of solutions and our plans for solutions will consider whether they are just or not. So yeah, perfect. So I think we got that one.
Can I also just add something on to the end of that answer about environmental justice? Environmental justice is obviously a very complex issue, and I just want to plug that this Carolina Sustainability Council is a very diverse group of people. We're coming from a lot of different departments, a lot of different backgrounds. We're certainly not perfect, but you are talking about, we're covering all the races, we're covering gender, we're covering all of the different departments on campus. We have people who do not even work for the school directly, but work for the state. We have finance people, we have water people, we have energy people, we have law people, we have everything you can imagine. We have undergrads, we have grad students. So we are covering all the bases. So I just want to assure, not specifically with environmental justice, but just in talking about the complex stuff behind all of this, we have perspectives being covered to the best of our ability.
I think that's a great point. We have a diverse group of incredibly capable people, which is really fun. And it makes us feel as though we're being responsible as we have these conversations. So thank you. That's a great point, Nate. All right, that looks like it might be it. I hope everybody has a great evening. Looks like it might be chilly out there again tonight, which is alarming to my fig tree, which has already been hit once by a freeze. So I'll be putting a sheet on it, which looks super weird, but seems to have worked last night. So everybody have a good evening. And again, please don't hesitate to get in touch. And we're going to have these sorts of engagement things more routinely, and hopefully they can be in person. So thank you all for coming, and we look forward to seeing you soon.